Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, good to have you. Were you surprised that you popped up on, that's a pretty exclusive list?
Good to be on with you. No, I wasn't too surprised. The president and his team had reached out a couple months ago to talk about some of the names on the list and asked me about my name last. And I said, I'd been clean from the law for 15 years and didn't plan to have a relapse. But I very much appreciated the president's confidence. And obviously, it's an honor to be included among such distinguished jurists. I think the real story here is it just goes to show the president is committed in his second term to building on his success of appointing conservative judges, and that we still don't have such a list from Joe Biden, because that list would be filled with a bunch of far-left radicals that would hurt him in this election. Just one more example of how the president is saying what he plans to do in a second term, whereas Joe Biden is continuing to hide his unpopular agenda from the American people.
Well, we don't know exactly what Biden is planning, but we do know that he has indicated that he would like to put an African-American woman on the court. That's the closest he's come to tipping his hand on this. But what do you think of the fact that on the president's list, there are quite a few senators? Josh Hawley, your colleague, who is not too keen on it. Senator Ted Cruz, I think, who probably would like that, but what do I know? A host of other former Solicitor General, that sort of thing. What's interesting is we have not had someone come from senator to make it all the way to be a Supreme Court pick since Harry Truman, I guess, did this back in 1949 with Senator Sherman Vinton. So it's unusual. I'm not saying unprecedented, but how likely do you think it would be that the president would turn to you, and then how likely do you think it is that you would take him up on that offer and go ahead and try?
Well, that's pretty far down the road, Neil. I'm running for re-election, as is he, and there's not even a vacancy yet. And there are a lot of eminently capable conservative jurists on that list. But I do think the president's list reflects the fact that he believes that a diverse perspective and set of backgrounds is useful for the Supreme Court. In the last few decades, we've kind of fallen into a pattern of continually appointing judges from the federal courts of appeals. There's nothing wrong with that. Many of them were extraordinary jurists like Sam Alito or Clarence Thomas. But to have senators who've had their name on the ballot, or to have a solicitor general, to have an assistant attorney general, there's a long history in our government of having Supreme Court justices who did not come up the ranks of just practicing law and then sitting on lower courts and then going to the Supreme Court. And I think it would help to have that kind of perspective, because one of the most fundamental qualifications for the court is to understand the difference between making the law and applying the law. And too often we have a group of 9 unelected lawyers who want to make the law in accordance with their preferences and not allow our people, whether in Congress or in the state legislatures through their elected representatives, to make the law for themselves.
We also have surprises, right? John Roberts will zig when everyone expected him to zag. Justice Kavanaugh, the same. So what many might have thought at the time were safe conservative bets who end up being anything but. You're a pretty conservative guy. I mean, your views are well known, certainly in Arkansas and throughout the nation. Who's to say that maybe sitting on that court and with those 8 other justices, and cases come up that whatever happens, you change. I've seen it happen, both sides.
Well, no, as you say, I've been in public life long enough now that my views are very well known. Sometimes you do have disappointments, as the Chief Justice has had numerous disappointments in recent years. I would say, though, that Justice Kavanaugh has been a very strong conservative voice over the last couple years in the Supreme Court, so I would not at all put him in the same category as the Chief Justice. But that just goes to show, again, that the president is committed to transparency with the American people. He wants the American people to look at his record of nominating conservative judges at the trial court, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court, and to know that he's going to nominate exactly those kind of judges in the future. I think that's one reason why he refreshed his older list and added this new group of persons to that list. And I think that's what Joe Biden should do. Joe Biden's obviously not going to do that, though.
All right. Well, we'll see. We don't know. But you're saying it is unusual. This is the first president who's done something like that, as he did 4 years ago, doing it again now. But I do want to get your views first as a senator. Who knows? Maybe as a justice down the road on the constitutionality of it, of this fight this one student is having in New York. Wants to attend in-person classes, being told that right now that's not the way they're doing it. They're doing a hybrid situation with virtual classes and some in-person classes. He wants them in person all the time. School told him, tough luck, kid, it's not going to happen. then they're the rules, essentially, the school seems to be saying. What do you think of that?
Well, I think what schools need to try to do is open for 5 days of in-person learning. That's what we've done in Arkansas. All schools offer a virtual option as well for students who have health conditions or who have parents with health conditions that might make it too risky for them to be in person. But we're now 3 weeks in, and sure, there's been some cases confirmed, but right now schools are making the very best of it. They have in-person classes. We've had football games already. We've had extracurricular activities. So what I would do is encourage more schools to open for 5 days of in-person classes. You know, a month or 6 weeks ago, so many of these schools were saying that we can't do that. Teachers unions were opposed to it. But now that we're 4 or 6 weeks on in places like Arkansas or in a lot of private schools around the country, and it is by and large succeeding, I think more schools need to move forward with in-person classes. I know a lot of schools have said they're going to make that decision at the end of September. I would encourage them to do so. That moves it in the direction of 5 days in school. And I just want to say, Neil, that also it's one reason it's so disappointing the Democrats in the Senate filibustered our legislation today that would have provided more funding for schools to reopen or schools to stay open. Then you wouldn't have these kinds of disputes that we've seen in New York if schools were open 5 days a week for in-person instruction.
Now, part of that package that essentially went down in flames, is, you know, obviously it's not going anywhere now, was liability protection for companies, businesses that do reopen. So in case someone gets coronavirus or they get sick or, you know, they can't be sued right out of business. Now, I only say that in the context of this news, sir, that J.P. Morgan, the big investment house, is telling its workers, we think the coast is clear right now for everyone to return back in our New York City offices on September 21st. Some allowances for those with kids and those with other conditions, but they're leading that charge without any legal protection. What do you think of that?
Well, it wouldn't provide liability protection just for businesses. It would also provide it for schools and for universities too, and that's an important step in moving in the direction of 5 days a week of in-person instruction, so schools and universities know that they won't face that kind of liability. This is not a blanket immunity from any kind of responsibility for irresponsible behavior. It's saying if you follow public health guidelines and exercise the best practices, then you can't be sued.
And that's what they're doing. I'm jumping on you again,
lawyers.
Senator, because I screwed up my timing here, but I hear where you're coming from. They're free to do that. They are going to do that. In the case of J.P. Morgan, they're going to implement that on the 21st. Everyone back at work in the building, and soon. More after this.